What's up, guys? So, you know how all the theoretical physicists have the many worlds hypothesis, where one of the possibilities is that if space is infinite and there are only so many ways that atoms can be arranged, then it stands to reason that far out there in never-ending space there could be other yous and me's living out very similar lives. So I started thinking one day, what if time infinitely repeats as well? Okay, so I realized that time as we know it is linked to space around us. But I mean, let's say the universe we know, 13 billion years old, plays out over trillions of years, and then a googolplex years after that, it repeats over and over again. It's a weird concept, I know, because at that point it might as well be the original linear concept, since it leaves you in between infinite time and infinite space, and wondering which way is up or down. I started wondering if this idea had been spoken of before, and then I ran across this guy, Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm not 100% on board with his theory because it locks people into fate, and I choose to believe that your choices can alter your path, but this is what I learned about him anyway. Eternal recurrence, also known as eternal return, is a philosophical concept that posits the cyclical nature of time and the idea that all events will eventually recur infinitely. The notion has its roots in ancient Indian and Greek philosophy, but it gained prominence in Western philosophy largely through the work of 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche presented the idea of eternal recurrence in one of his books, where he introduced the thought experiment of the greatest weight. Imagine that a demon appears before you and reveals that your life, with all its joys and sorrows, successes and failures, will repeat itself infinitely. Every moment, every decision, and every experience will be relived over and over again. Forever. Nietzsche asked how one would react to this revelation. Would it be a burden or an affirmation of one's life? The concept of eternal recurrence challenges individuals to confront the meaning and the values of their lives. If everything is destined to repeat itself infinitely, then every action and decision carries significant weight. In this context, Nietzsche urged people to live their lives in such a way that they would be willing to embrace the eternal recurrence of their actions, giving rise to his idea, amor fati, or the love of fate. It is important to note that Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is not a scientific theory, but rather a philosophical thought experiment. As such, there's no empirical evidence to support the idea that time is cyclical or that events will recur infinitely. Nonetheless, the concept has had a lasting impact on Western philosophy, influencing existentialism, phenomenology, and postmodern thought, as it compels individuals to examine their lives, choices, and values more deeply. Has the idea of eternal recurrence affected us? Sure. Number one, the psychological impact. Nietzsche's thought experiment of eternal recurrence is intended to provoke a strong psychological reaction in the individual. The idea that one's life will repeat infinitely forces people to confront the choices they make and the life that they lead. For some, this might be a source of despair or a feeling of being trapped. For others, it could be motivation to live more authentically and intentionally, knowing that their choices have lasting consequences. Number two, the moral implications. Eternal recurrence can be seen as a challenge to traditional moral systems. If all events are predetermined to recur infinitely, then the notions of guilt, punishment, and redemption might be called into question. In this context, the concept can be seen as a call to develop a personal ethical framework based on self-affirmation and love of fate rather than relying on external moral codes. Number three, relationship to other philosophical ideas. The idea of eternal recurrence has connections to other philosophical concepts such as determinism and free will. If all events are predetermined to reoccur, then it might seem that free will is an illusion. However, Nietzsche's emphasis on embracing one's fate suggests that individuals can still find meaning and purpose in their actions. even within the context of eternal recurrence. Number 4, the critiques and alternate perspectives. Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence has been criticized from various angles. Some argue that the concept is purely speculative and lacks any empirical grounding. Others contend that it is incompatible with modern scientific understanding, which tends to support a linear rather than cyclical view of time. However, some philosophers have found value in the concept as a metaphor or a tool for personal reflection and self-improvement. Number 5, influence on art and culture. This one's my favorite. The concept of eternal recurrence has inspired various works of art, literature, and film. For instance, the idea can be found in movies such as Groundhog Day, The Matrix, Happy Death Day, and Edge of Tomorrow, where characters are forced to relive the same day repeatedly until they come to terms with their choices and actions. Additionally, writers like Milan Kundera have explored the concepts in their novels, and musicians have used it as a theme in their compositions. While Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence is not a scientifically established theory, it remains a thought-provoking and influential idea that continues to inspire philosophical discussion and creative expression. Now, while I like to believe that if your life were to repeat forever, maybe making different choices could lead you towards a completely different path. I mean, after all, there are millions of possibilities that could be explored given the many choices that we make every second as well, right? I do not intend to try to sell this as an ideology. It's not even what I believe. I personally just find this to be an interesting thought experiment sometimes when I'm making decisions. If you knew you lived this life before and that you would live it again infinitely, what would you do differently to steer yourself towards a better outcome? Would any of this cause you to be a little more disciplined with your life? Knowing that every choice may be able to compound onto itself infinitely later on.